So now we're gonna speak about uncontrolled components, and these are the components that we do not set their value, but we need another way to get the value from them. And actually, I haven't used this stuff for a while, so I expected the file component to work like the rest, but actually it doesn't work like them. So the value here is read only. So they say use uncontrolled components to get the value from it. And the later in documentation they mean in the advanced. And the advanced section is from advanced guides, and this is the refs and DOM. And this is not one of the things I use usually. So I think I use it like once in a year. And yeah, when you need it, you look for it and then you use it. So yeah, it's not a thing that you're going to use every day, at least not in my case. So in the refs you define, so yeah, they recommend using control components to implement forms. That's the default way and the easiest, most straightforward. Form data is handled by the React component. Alternative way is uncontrolled component, where form data is handled by the DOM itself. And then you get the value by referencing the element in the DOM. So in the React component you get a reference when you render. You save a reference to this element, and then when you need on demand, you get the value of this element, and then you get the reference of this element and get the value from it. So to write an uncontrolled component, you're not going to set the value of it to specify that's not controlled, and use something else. Use a ref, and to define a ref, it's something like this. You say a ref, and it takes a function, and this function receives the input as the first parameter, and this input is the thing that you're using. It's a reference to it, and you want to just save it to React itself. So you save it to this input, and this is the class or the component. Then in the render function you got a reference to this element, and then you saved it in the class. Then in another function, in the handle submit, you can get this input, and you know that input is this. And again, you can name it anything. The name here doesn't matter, just representation. So if we go to the file input that we were working with, and we were trying to get the on-change, we're not going to do this. This is not correct. What we're going to do instead is add a reference and get the input, and could be file input, could be anything, and or file ref, could be any name. And this file ref, we're going to save it in the class with any name we want. So then we're going to get this value in the class and can use it in anywhere that has the has this in its context. So on submit, we're going to go back and get this file input, which we saved, which references this element, and then files of 0, because you know it's going to get at least one file, or you can check the files at length, and then files of 0.name. So if we go here and check this thing, I console logged it, so it's in the console. I didn't get the value from the thing. So file here, you can see it in the DevTools, has the file name in it. So we can update the stringify this state. So I can update the state and say stringify state. Well, it doesn't matter, you know the drill. So here I console log the file name. Just say file name is this file input files 0.name. Actually, it's not going to work if the files length is not set. So we're going to say name file name equals this file input files length. If length is defined and length is more than 0, then we're going to get input file with files of 0 name, otherwise it's going to be empty. think it's gonna always have length, so I don't have to check this because it's a DOM element. So if the length is more than 0, I will get the name of the first element. Otherwise, it's an empty string, and then I would just set the file name and the thing, and then I get the name, and then you can continue with the upload process using other stuff. But I don't think anyone does this anymore. You can use something like drop zone or one of these tools and just drag and drop and get the thing directly. So if you want to check drop zone React or React drop zone. It has been there for a long time, and usually a good thing to work with when you work with files. And yeah, it has this on drop and has everything. Styles are nice. I'm sure they have a demo somewhere. Definitely check this out for files. Cool. So this is the ref. So yeah, this is how we create a ref and get the input. If it's a text field, instead of getting this.input.files0, you're just gonna get this.input.value. So as if you, so this.input is gonna be like similar to e.target. This is the DOM element itself. Since the uncontrolled element keeps the source of truth in the DOM, and the element itself is sometimes easier to integrate React and non-React code when using uncontrolled components. It can be slightly less code if you want to do it quick and dirty, otherwise you should usually use uncontrolled components. So people use the ref if you have a library that's like written with jQuery or any other non-React tool and doesn't have all this React states, but you know that it's going to be in the DOM. So you can add this element, like import the element from the DOM directly and have a reference to it in React, then work with it. So this is useful if you want to work with something that that's not implemented in React. You just work with the DOM directly. Then you can have a jQuery library integrated with it. You can have other cool stuff. But again, you're not going to see if you're going to work with React. This is a rare case. If it's still not clear which component you want to use in particular situation, you might find this outcome component versus uncontrolled components. Yeah, definitely read this in your own time as a plus. So you cannot set the value in uncontrolled component, because if you set the value, then it's controlled. So to set the default value, the value you're going to start with, you set default value instead. You get why we need to do this if it's uncontrolled?
Sorry.
So you were right. So we're talking now about uncontrolled components, and uncontrolled components are components that you do not set the value to them. They're basically just elements in the DOM, and the way you work with them, you just create something like this, a ref, and a ref is a function that takes the input, the reference to this DOM element, like completely in HTML, and you save this element in the component itself. You save the reference to it using any name you want. Then if you want to get this element, DOM element, in React component, you just need to reference this.input. So you don't have to have this on change. It's a different way. It's not recommended. The way we're working with is the recommended one. But there are uses, useful uses to this method. If you want to work with a DOM element directly, and you don't want to get the constant change, or if you're working with a library that is not written in React, but you want to still get the DOM element of it, like a jQuery library or something older. So you want it to work as expected, but you still want to get the value from it in React. So you import the library, but you get the reference using this way. So if you're using ref, this means it's an uncontrolled component, meaning it has its own state, and it works. And then whenever I want, I just use this.input or this.reference name that I saved in the class to get the value from it. But if you want to set the default value, you don't use value. Because if you use value, then it's controlled. You use default value, only if you're using the ref. If you're ever in doubt, just read the uncontrolled components in advanced guides and control in the forms. So you can use it with other types as well. With the file input tag, we just work with it. So in React, the file is always uncontrolled component because the value can only be set by the user, and you cannot set it programmatically. So with the input tag, I tried in the last video or before the break to get the value directly from the onChange, but it didn't work because I misused it. I didn't use the API correctly. So the way they work with it is you have a reference to the element using this. So I'm not going to set a value. I'm not going to have onChange, or I could have onChange, but when I read the value, I read the files. Like I have the reference to the element, and then on submit, I'm going to get files of zeroed name. So the way the file input works, it gives you a list of files that the user selected from the browser. So to work with file, if you're going to do a library from scratch and you're going to work with the file yourself, use the ref, don't use the onChange. And then on submit in the form, you can get the file from the DOM and then .files of zeroed name, and then you can upload it using other APIs. Cool. So this is the uncontrolled components. You guys have any questions? Any confusing parts? Okay, Isaac?
We work at home, then we come back to
You always need to practice. I'm going to be with you, and we're going to work with this today. So if you guys, like now, we could go back and continue with the lifting state up and composition and inheritance and thinking React. But in my opinion, I think working by yourself is 10 times better than trying to understand the concept of it. Because if you don't understand the thing, it might not make sense. So we could work with an API now and actually have calls and render stuff and use forms to get data and send it and retrieve it and do these kind of things. You want to go this path or read more documentation, understand the concept of React?
it's better to do the practice.
Cool.
My question was about event listener. Do we need anyone adding an event listener?
Well, we have an event listener on change in any control component. So this is an event listener. So on change is an event, and you listen to the event that's in change. So whenever you see this, we are registering a function for this event on change. You have other events as well, but this is whenever something changes from on the input field, or you have the on click on a button. This is another event. So you were using the event listeners. It's
So
just
instead of, if you go down, instead of input, this submit, if we put a button there, just an element for button here, how would we?
so a button would have the value equals submit, and here I would say the on click equals this dot handle submit. So the input, is it name or do I say?
You probably need to specify the type of that button.
But that's if it's an input, right? So it's an input, I need to specify type equal button, and then I set the value equals submit, and then on click equals this dot handle submit. So this is one way. The other way is this. So I'm just submitting directly, but it's not alerting.
Because it's you need to do this prevent default because it's refreshing the page
yeah.
before it reaches the.
It's actually a very good point. Forgot to do this. So in handle submit, if you have your own submit, so in a form in HTML, you could have your target here, like the form that you submit to directly. Could be an email, could be an API. But if you have your own function, again, you can like have an Ajax post in here. You need to prevent default to prevent the default behavior. So when a form submits, it actually calls the target here or the target of the form to post the data if you have type post. But we're not using this here. We're just having our own function, and then we're gonna write our own code, have Ajax call, or we're gonna call a database or whatever. So we don't need the default behavior. And to do this, we have either prevent default, which I should have wrote from the beginning actually.
But you need to put in the beginning of it. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, so that's true.
So why?
So
That's not gonna work. Okay. This is because we. So why do we?
Because so what was happening is that it was refreshing the page before it was reaching. So there is when the form was being submitted.
Yeah.
The default behavior was to refresh the page.
Yeah.
And that was happening before you reach the remaining stuff that you were console logging and alerting.
Now it works.
Okay, now.
I think when it gets in the function, it's all synchronous. There is no asynchronous stuff. I think because this was failing, this was breaking,
Yeah.
so it was not continuing the execution. But if we have an async thing, it actually, if we have an async function, then no, it's still going to continue. I don't know. Well, just put it in the front. Would be easier. But it should work fine.
By principle, it's good to put it in top because
Yeah.
you can have stuff, and so it is by
Yeah.
principle a good thing to have.
Yeah, I totally agree. You just put this in the front because, like me, if you forget, then just make sure that you're not going to forget. But this prevents the default behavior of the form, and it's not going to submit it or refresh the page. So it's good to have it on your submit functions. So when we have submit now, we submit the form, and if we go here and check grapefruit, we get the value from the form, and now we have a button with an onclick. So we're not using the submit anymore. And let's see if we remove this with the button, will it work? I actually don't know.
It should.
And it worked.
It does work.
So this answers your question. So we're not using the onSubmit, we're using a button with an onClick. And let's try an input type button with an onClick as well. And still works. So you can use an input type button with value submit. You can use a button directly, which I think is still an input type button. Should be. This is input type button. So I'm not sure what's the difference between both of them. And this is in the DOM is button. So type button. Yeah. So you can use either of them. There must be a difference, but I don't know what it is. But using the submit in the form, I think is the most intuitive way. Kind of makes sense. You have your submit up there, and then you have the submit button, which is cleaner here, without the comments, of course. You can have these just as a test. P have edge stream form values. So we have the message. We have name, email, message, fruit, and checked. So checked, we have the file, but I'm not going to get the value. This did stay checked. Check. It's true. Otherwise, check. So, grapefruit, have the message, have the email, have the name, but the name we changed it. Let's change it back. So this was a test. Cool. Any other questions? So did you answer a question about the handler? Daria, any question? Guys, Rashid? Cool. Cool. So I'm gonna save this. Add more tests. Form.